grid. Today, I've got Chris Younger from Denver, Colorado with us. And Chris is going to talk to us a little bit about building businesses and selling businesses. I'm excited to have this conversation. Chris, welcome to the Income Flip.
Rob, thanks so much for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
Now, you and I were talking before we jumped in here, and we're talking a little bit about your name, Class 6 Partners, right? And I was like, well, out of Denver, Colorado, he's got to be like a White Rapids enthusiast or something like that. But you were telling me that during COVID, I guess FINRA came out with a rule that said that you guys couldn't have the word advisors in the name, right?
Yeah, they changed it. Reg BI is what it's called, and they changed their regulations, so we couldn't use the name we had used for 20 years, Capital Value Advisors. So we made a change.
Wow. Well, that's a big change, and I love the name now, by the way.
Good. Yeah.
So you've been in the business how long?
We've been doing our business since about 2005, so
Okay.
18 years.
18 years. So what I always love to do is get context of how you personally started the business, why this became a calling for you, and then we kind of arrive to where you are, and then we'll kind of springboard from there. But take me back. Like, how did you get into this business to start with?
That's a great question. So I don't hold this against me. I started out as an attorney in Silicon Valley and practiced for a couple of years. I always joke that I've been through all 12 steps. I'm pretty fully recovered. Every once in a while, I'll relapse, but I did that for a couple of years, and then I worked with an investor group to do a roll up in the communication sector. So I was the deal guy. I was out doing all the acquisitions, and we acquired 27 communications companies. These were VARs, value-added resellers across the country, and rolled all those into one business, and then sold that to Avaya Communications. So I was the deal guy to start with, became the COO. We got the business to about $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion in revenue, and then we sold it to Avaya, and was the president of that business when we sold. And then tried to retire. I was too young to retire, as I learned. And my wife told me I needed to find a hobby. So that's what I did. Wanted to stay married. I still am married, almost 30 years.
Awesome.
And
congratulations, by the way. That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Well, yeah.
Especially as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my wife has eternal patience. I can tell you that. So, so then David Tolson and I we had gotten to know each other, and we really looked at kind of what was happening in the lower mid-market in terms of businesses getting sold and how they were prepared, and just thought we could do a better job. So we genuinely started it as a hobby. We were going to do 1 or 2 deals a year. We just love working with entrepreneurs. It's the best part about my job. And so we started the business, and we kind of got busier and busier. And fortunately, we've been able to hire just unbelievably talented, smart, hardworking, really well aligned with our value system people. And we're now about 50 people. And it's just been a wild ride and a ton of fun. And like I said, I get to work with entrepreneurs every day, which I don't know any job that would be better.
Yeah, I love that. Let me go back in time a little bit. When did you roll up the VARs that were purchased by Avaya? What year was that?
So we started that business in 96 and then sold it to Avaya in 2003.
Interesting. So I'm just looking at my tech timetable, right? I was a tech sales recruiter for 7 years, started in 98, experienced that whole .com boom, that whole .com bust in 2002. Technology, I mean, like, communications was getting whacked at the time. Like, what was that?
Challenging.
What was that environment like for you?
So our business was a little bit different than the carrier side, right? The fiber and the networks. Ours was communications equipment for small to medium-sized businesses. So these were phone systems and data networks for what we call the SMB market, the small, medium-sized business market. And it was challenging. We were trying to integrate 27 companies, put a new system, new ERP system in, and then 9/11 hits, and then the .com. I mean, there was just lots and lots of noise going on in the system, and you can't see how tall I am, but I used to be a lot taller before having gone through that experience. But it was challenging.
Well, I would imagine also the opportunity to grow through something like that, integrating 27 different businesses to me. We run a business that has multiple businesses and business units in it. Um, and it's challenging, right? What are some of the learning lessons that you pulled out of that experience during that time? I'm just curious.
Yeah. How much time do we have? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
top
You
top
learn
one or two, top one or
yeah.
two that come to mind, right?
You learn a lot. I always joke, out of the 27 deals that we did, I would say 9 of them were a lot more successful than I expected. 9 of them were about as successful as we expected, and 9 of them, they should have fired me for doing those deals,
Mhm,
just because they were
mhm,
so bad. And some of the things that you learn, and I do think you learn the most from the two by fours. Part of those learnings was all about, it's in that kind of business in particular, it's all about the people. And if you don't have a good sense for the motivations, the talent level, the depth of the team, it's likely not going to be a great deal for you.
mhm,
So
mhm,
one of the things that I did learn on the buy side was the businesses that we acquired that were of sufficient scale that they had a really strong number two, a really strong president, a really strong chief operating officer. Those tended to be our very best deals.
mhm,
Those were
mhm,
deals in which you had somebody who was already used to taking direction. So when the entrepreneur decided to transition, which a lot of them did, and it's
mhm,
understandable, hey, we had somebody in place who was super talented and was able to execute well and continue to execute well. So that was one big, big lesson. I think the second one is, people often talk about synergies when you're doing an acquisition. Hey, we're going to save this money. We're going to eliminate this headcount. And I would say I actually think the opposite is true for the most part, particularly in people businesses and particularly in businesses that have kind of different operating systems or different operating structures. We almost experience the reverse in terms of synergies, where if you imagine you're acquiring two businesses in the same geography and they have different sales commission plans.
mhm,
Well, if both those businesses are doing well and you're trying to consolidate those businesses, you'd be a fool to take the less attractive compensation plan and roll that out to to a business that you just bought and alienate all those salespeople. So what
mhm,
ended up happening is you ended up moving all of your comp levels higher, because that was now you didn't want one employee from the one business saying, well, I do the same job as that person over there and I'm getting paid, a lower amount. That's not fair. So I think there's just a lot of learning that you do when you're acquiring that many businesses and trying to integrate them. But those are probably the two big lessons,
yeah, that's interesting. I can completely say that. I think that's probably why Warren Buffett just buys companies and leaves them alone, right?
right? There's a lot of wisdom to that.
Yeah, just leave them alone, let them do their thing. He bought them for a reason, right? And yeah, people try to kind of, I know that we've experienced that, right? We're just trying to bring in multiple bit, and we all do things slightly different. There's friction in the process. They're used to doing it one way compared to the way we've done it. There's
For
friction
sure.
there. And then, you've got to be a good people manager and in that process, right?
Yeah, and managing entrepreneurs is its own art form.
Yeah.
I always took the approach of, hey, to your point, we bought that business for a reason, that entrepreneur was really talented. And I viewed my job as, back to kind of the servant leadership model. I viewed my job as serving them. How do I
Hmm.
make their jobs easier? How do I make it easier for them to do what they're really, really good at? And if you let them run, they're going to do pretty well because they've done pretty well in the past. It's
Hmm.
more about trying to get out of their way and be additive versus, sometimes I think investors show up as the smartest guy in the room, and that's dangerous, really dangerous, I think, when dealing with entrepreneurs.
I want to, everybody listening in right now, I want to give them some context on the types of businesses you start off mentoring and partnering with, and then growing, and then eventually potentially even helping them sell, and then managing, a family business. Kind of walk us through what that looks like, right? Say I'm a $10 million business, and we start talking. What does that process look like?
Yeah, the first thing we're going to do is get to know you as the entrepreneur and the owner. We want to understand, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? What's your timeline for those goals? We want to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are. We have a whole template that we use internally to give us kind of the archetype of the type of entrepreneur that we're dealing with.
Mm,
And we've dealt with hundreds of them, so we have a pretty good sense for, if you come from this type of background and you make decisions in this type of way, hey, generally this is what we're going to see as strengths, and this is what we're going to see as potentially, having exposure. And so that's the first thing we're going to do. Second thing we're going to do is get to know the business really well. So we've now understand what you're trying to accomplish by what time period. All right, well, where's the business situated today? And we're going to give you a really objective view, or an investor's view of that business, to see where that gap is between what your objective is and which time frame, and where the business is today. And
mhm,
then the next step is just, all right, well, what's the plan to get from here to there? And
mhm,
how do we put that plan together in such a way that it's easy to understand? It's going to be clear in terms of what the priorities are and where you should start, and know, here's what I need to execute on, over the next quarter, over the next 2 quarters, over the next year, over the next couple years. And then at that point, as we start to near kind of goal accomplishment, which typically for a lot of business owners is the valuation of the business. Hey, if I can get this business to be worth 50 million pre-tax, that's where I want to be. Great. Then you just monitor that business, monitor the plan that's being executed. And as we feel like we're getting close to that, all right, now let's move into more significant prep phase, where we're preparing that business to go to market. That's
mhm,
getting all the due diligence ready, getting the models done, starting to think about the story that we're going to tell the market. What are the potential objections that we're going to hear, and how are we going to answer those? Um, and then it's take the business to market and put the story
mhm.
together, reach out to bidders, start to put that auction process together where we are attracting interest and hopefully attracting bids, and then manage that whole negotiation. And then hopefully get them to closing, in a reasonable period of time, where not only have we hit, but hopefully we've exceeded their objective in terms of what they needed for the business.
I believe that success always leaves clues. And when you're underwriting lots of businesses and talking to lots of entrepreneurs, you probably see patterns, right? Just like you said, here's a pattern of this type of entrepreneur. This is potentially around what they think, or how they think, or what their weaknesses and strengths are. I'm curious, out of the 9 that were successful, you already gave us clue number 1, right? Like, hey, there's a successful entrepreneur and a great number 2, right?
Yep.
What other patterns do you see for the ones that are most successful, that really kind of like, you're like, damn, that launched and did exactly what we thought it would do?
I think there's a couple things that I would point to. One is, when you talk to their customers, those customers are going to give you a lot of clues as to why you as an investor should either like or dislike the company. If the customers are fanatics and they love the business, or they love the product, they love the service, whatever it is, and they are overly enthusiastic about it, that's going to tell you something about why you as an investor would like that business as well. That
Mhm,
means that they're delivering something compelling into the market in such a way that they've made evangelists out of their customers. And so I've always said, I think investors like businesses for the same reasons that customers like the business. And if
mhm,
you can identify what that is, I think you'll get pretty good insight into, hey, why would an investor like the business? The
mhm,
second thing, that when I look at these successful businesses, they are built to scale. And by that, I mean, they can grow and absorb growth in a really disciplined way. If a business doesn't have a deep team, or they don't have great systems, or they haven't been thoughtful around how expensive it is to grow in the particular ways that they want to grow, those businesses can't scale very well, or
mhm,
the risk of scaling is going to be too high for a typical investor. So understanding, how is this business going to grow, and can the business support it? Do they have the right people, the right processes, the right infrastructure, the right systems? And will the market tolerate that growth? Those are really the questions that, I, as a buyer of businesses, would want to ask.
okay. What kind of businesses do you prefer?
I love businesses with a scalable business model. And by
Okay.
that, I mean, like one of the archetypes that's just, we love these businesses are software as a service. They call them
Sure.
SaaS
SaaS.
businesses.
Hmm.
Yep. Hey, obviously it's expensive up front to develop it. Once it's developed and it's got market acceptance, then it's really a sales and marketing game to scale that business. And that's a very predictable way to grow a business. So
Hmm.
we love those businesses. I also love businesses with really strong brands. That can be product brands or service brands. Most often in our case, we do a lot of consumer products businesses, but I love it when they have a strong brand where, they, the back to that customer fanaticism about those products, they're selling through, in terms of their channels, whether that's Amazon or retail or direct to consumer, they're getting velocity just because the customers keep coming back.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
again, that business, if I've got a really strong brand, that means that once I sell a customer, they're going to continue to buy.
Hmm.
And as long as I can continue to keep that brand strong with those customers, then I'm just adding more and more customers. Contrast that with, take a project business. Maybe it's a construction business or a consulting business where that project has a defined lifespan. You're not likely to sell another project or service to that customer. That means every day you got to go hunt the new one. And those businesses are much, much more difficult to scale because there's, they've got to, the lion and the gazelle story, right? They've got to
Sure.
run, they've got to
Every
get
day
up
you got to
running.
wake up. Yeah. Yeah. Every day you got to get up and
Yep.
you got to run. Yeah. It's
You got to
interesting.
run.
The equivalent in our side of the business, because a lot of the business owners that are listening to this will kind of have that ladder business, meaning um, they're transactional. They've got to get up and run every single day. They're in the brokerage or the wholesaling or the rehabbing business. Like they're only as good as that last transaction. And the goal is to take that money that they're making to start buying longer term assets or building businesses that are an extension of their core business, meaning like maybe even developing some kind of software around what they do. Um, and there's this transition that I see that happens within the world of real estate, this construction space, real estate brokerage, and it's a challenge, right? We're affiliated with Keller Williams Realty, so Keller
Mhm.
Williams largest uh, broker in the world, and they came out a few years ago saying we're a technology company, right? They were trying to migrate it to a tech company, and it was painful. It was expensive. It was really hard. And this past event, they didn't have any kind of discussion around technology. There was that drum was not being beaten, but they're still working on it behind the scenes, right? I think they came out of the gate saying we're a tech company, this is what we're doing. And there was a lot of learning lessons in that process. Um, which is I've heard multiple stories of people that have tried to build a SaaS product, kind of piggybacking off of the existing core business that they have, and it's just like crashing and burning. It's expensive, right? It's
Well,
expensive.
it's expensive, and unless it's leveraging your kind of core competence, uh, the odds are going to be stacked against you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm a big believer. If you're good at something, you should double, triple, quadruple down on that until there's nothing left to give anymore, right? Where that
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
that's where your comparative advantage is. For
Mm-hmm.
most, I'm sure, for a lot of businesses, their comparative advantage is not in developing software, and so
Mm-hmm.
the odds are stacked against them right away.
Mm-hmm.
I like your notion of finding. It's great to generate cash from these businesses, but how do you find other investments where that can generate recurring profits to you without a whole lot of involvement?
Without a whole lot. Exactly. How do you just add these? How do you buy businesses, right? That would be
Right.
another one where it's like take this cash machine that you have and start buying some of these assets that will spit out cash for you over time, whether they're properties
For
or
sure.
or investing in some kind of SaaS company or something. So, do you ever find that you run into businesses that have a model that do that?
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. I think, entrepreneurs are always looking for market opportunities, ways that they can, they can grow, they can develop. And some businesses, look, we've seen some businesses be successful at developing software, but not without a lot of pain and not without a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's, if you're doing that for the first time, it's really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a good friend of mine. He's developing a SaaS product. And he said, Rob, it is 10 times more expensive than I thought. We're nowhere even close. He's like, I'm so committed. I'm pot committed at this point. I just have to keep going, until I make this work. Right.
He's
So
all in. Yeah.
he's all in. I was talking to my
Yeah.
team today about what does all in actually mean.
Yeah.
So we talked a little
One
bit
of the
about
things
that.
I love about entrepreneurs is they're all in.
They're all in. You have to be.
They're not going to fail.
Well, how do these businesses find you, or do you find them? Or tell me, what does that relationship look like?
Yeah, typically, I mean, almost all of our business is referrals. So it's
Mhm.
somebody that's gotten to know us. It could be a professional advisor. It could be another client. But that's typically how folks find us. Obviously, we're on the web, class6partners.com, classvipartners.com. And it's, pretty easy to find us.
Sure. So just because I'm new to this side, so I'd love to just get clarity, and I'm sure our listeners would too. So let's say I approach you. I'm a $10 million business, right? And you evaluate the owner, right? The entrepreneur. You evaluate the business. You understand our goals, where we want to go. What happens at that? You make an investment, you buy into the business, you guide it, or do you just guide them for a successful exit, and then you take a piece of it?
Yeah, probably 8 out of 10 of those, we're going to guide them.
Okay.
We do have our family office clients do like making investments. And so there
Mhm.
are some times when they're making investments either through a fund that we manage or directly into these companies. But our job, I always viewed our job as how do we surround that entrepreneur with the very best advice, experience, and counsel that we can to help
Mhm.
them navigate this journey, because it's a new one for them. For
Mhm.
most of them, it's usually their
Mhm.
first time through it. And so, there's a lot of potholes that you can step into if you're not careful. And that's our job, is to try to remove those and make the journey a little bit easier for them.
Got it. And so how long does that typically take? How long is that dance?
So it varies. We just did a deal last year. It was in the pet supplement industry of all things, where we worked with that company for 8 years. Now they ended up selling for almost $500 million, so it was worth it to them
Wow.
to do all that work.
Mhm.
But we've had other clients that come to us and they're ready to go to market,
Hmm.
and obviously that's probably half of our business is folks that want to go to market, or they've been approached by a buyer and they need help navigating it.
Got it. Yeah, and they don't know what they don't know, so they come to you for
Yep.
advice on how to make it better. Like in my world, it would be like, how do I actually take this property and improve its value, right? These are the things that you could do to improve the value to maximize the sale of that asset. Right?
Yeah,
That's what you're doing.
exactly.
That's what you're doing for businesses, right?
Exactly.
What is it, just out of curiosity, what does the commission for something like that look like? Right.
It'll vary. Typically, it's just a percentage of the deal, and so obviously, the larger the deal, the smaller the
Okay.
percentage. But our percentages will range anywhere from 2 or 2.5% up to 5 or 6%, depending on kind of complexity of the
Deal.
deal and how well we did.
Yeah. 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 We're in the same business. You
Yep,
just
same business.
you're just selling bigger businesses, with bigger number, right, associated with it. Very cool. So what is the biggest challenge then in your business, especially in the environment that we're in right now?
Today, I would say the biggest challenge is there still is a pretty significant mismatch between buyer expectations of value and seller expectations of value. I don't know that sellers have fully reconciled to the fact that interest rates are higher.
Yeah.
And I don't think people recognize just how unique and rare and probably will never happen again having a 0% Fed funds rate was.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
led to really, really high valuations, right? Because
Hmm.
the debt costs were pretty low. Now, as interest rates have come back, and historically, they're actually, not that far from what we've seen on average. But that has a negative impact on valuations. And as you might expect, in a seller's market, buyers never adjust as quickly, and a buyer's market, sellers never adjust as quickly. And that's probably the biggest challenge that we see is, especially in some of the industries that we deal with, consumer products and SaaS, some of those valuations in 2021, 2022 got pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
now, hey, those are coming back to earth, or at least, closer to earth. And that takes some adjustment, but these are markets and they will ultimately adjust.
Yeah, they adjust. That entrepreneur had a friend that had a really
Yeah.
nice exit in 2021, so that's all they can think about, right?
Yep. Yep.
That valuation, it's just like it's a different market. It's a
It
different
is
market, right?
totally different. Totally different.
Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate something that I heard, right? Because I love looking at patterns. It's like, hey, great leader, great number two. Um, you're looking at whether customers consider you like they're fanatics around your business. Somebody that's built a really, really good brand is another one, right? Obviously, recurring revenue that's coming from that. Like you don't have like businesses that are are just like project based, and then you got to go hunt for the next project. So you're looking for businesses that have recurring revenue. Is there anything else that you might say, hey, here's the Achilles heel of the businesses that don't succeed? These are where the mighty fall. Always like to look at those
Yeah.
patterns too.
Yeah. One of the things we built during COVID was an assessment of a business that really is focused on what are the different risks or gotchas in that business that could derail a deal or significantly impact valuation. It's a tool we call Copilot. And that basically asks about 150 questions. All we're trying to do is issue spot to determine, hey, are there potential deal killers here? I'll give you some examples.
Mm-hmm.
Is too much of the revenue coming from a single or a few
Mm-hmm.
customers?
Mm-hmm.
We call it customer concentration risk. Do they have a supply chain issue? That became really, really important during COVID, and all the supply chain disruption that we saw there. Is the team not deep at all? Is it basically the owner? Is the business way too
Mm-hmm.
dependent on the owner? That can often kill a deal. Are there any gotchas in the contracts? Are there rights of first refusal for the acquisition of that business that would basically make it unsaleable to another party? So we identified about 100 different risks, maybe 20 of those I would call significant deal killer type risks. And then 80 are, hey, these are things you've got to manage and develop a story around if you're going to go to market, because buyers, they will reduce the valuation or their valuation of the company if those risks are present.
Mm-hmm. And are you doing deals all throughout the country? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We've done deals up in Maine all the way down to California and Texas and Florida, and obviously a lot here in Colorado as well.
So I'm curious, where you in our business right now, like in the real estate business, the thing that we're suffering the most is lack of inventory, right? Not enough product on the market, and it's interesting because it's holding prices up, even though interest rates are creeping up to 8%,
Yeah.
and but the velocity of sales has gone down by 30 to 40% because there's just, why are you going to sell your locked in 30-year mortgage at
Right.
3% or
Yeah.
buy something else, right? It's unless you're like dying, divorcing,
Yep.
life, right? Um, where are you kind of in the business cycle right now? What are you seeing?
That's a great question. We saw at the end of 21, going into 22, the deal activity was all-time highs. There was this kind of snowplow effect from COVID, and 22 was a pretty busy year. I would say Q4 of 2022, we probably saw deal volume decrease the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be starting to recover a little bit. I think
Mm-hmm.
back to that seller and buyer expectations starting to kind of come together. We're starting to see that happen. We've been very busy this year, fortunately. And one of the things that we've seen is if you have a really good business, you're going to do really well in this market because there's still a ton of capital out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of private equity, a lot of private credit, and that all needs to find a home. And so if you have a high quality business, there's going to be a lot of competition for it. We just did a deal process 2 quarters ago. we had 35 bids. So that, and that was a really, really well run business. And we're seeing that with some of the other processes that we're running, where lots and lots of interest in high quality businesses.
That's 35 bids. That's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, we love those days.
That's great. I mean, it's kind of like what we've experienced, right? Like 30, 40 offers on one of our properties, and we're like,
Yeah,
fantastic.
that deal will close. Yeah.
Yeah, that deal. Yeah, one of them is going to close for sure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we're kind of seeing the same thing in our side, meaning Q1 and Q2, we felt, I mean, we saw it at the end of last year, right? But Q1 and Q2 was us kind of like readjusting our margins based on the new reality of what we see, and yet it was still busy, right? And we're seeing activity pick up, right? We're seeing more inventory hitting the market. We're seeing still a big appetite for people to deploy their capital,
Sure.
into shelter, per se. I'm just curious what your crystal ball says over the next 6 to 12 months. What are you thinking?
I sense, at least this is what we see, obviously, unless something dramatic happens with the Fed or some other exogenous event, my sense is the markets will be pretty good. It seems like valuations, like I said, we're kind of getting better alignment between sellers and buyers. I think there's a lot, the demographic trends, there's a lot of baby boomers who own companies who need to at some point transition. And I do think that, we'll see pretty good activity over the next 3 or 4 years, not without some bumps and bruises, right? I mean, I think that's the nature of this market, but we feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, fantastic. I just had a friend of mine. He got Goldman Sachs bought, I think, 8 to 10% of their business for like $100 million, right? And this was the beginning of 2022, maybe. I was like, man, your timing was like perfect, right?
Yeah.
And they're kind of a combination of a real estate business and a SaaS business. Their businesses all operate on a SaaS infrastructure, right? And it was really interesting because you could never get that valuation without him building some kind of like underlying tech that
For
plugs all the businesses in. It's like, man, it's brilliant. Like,
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah,
good for him.
But it got us all thinking about how we could do the same within our business, right?
For sure.
Our businesses.
Yep.
Do you have a preference? Because I know, you cover everything consumer goods and SaaS business, but do you have a preference for the type of businesses or maybe even the type of entrepreneur that you looked at?
Yeah, probably more the latter than the former. I mean, we love manufacturing, we love SaaS, we love distribution, we love consumer products. For the entrepreneur, where we do really well and we really enjoy is, entrepreneur who's what I would call a lifelong learner. They are they've kind of they take a learning approach to their business, right? They know that they don't know everything, and then the other piece is just highly collaborative. We do really well when we've got a highly collaborative client, because we're never going to know their business or their industry as well as they do. Likewise, they're probably never going to know the deal process as well as we do. But when we collaborate, that's when magic happens. And so we look really closely for signs of that kind of evidence of collaboration.
Yeah, I could see that. Lifelong learner. They're anti-fragile when it comes to that, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the definition, right? An anti-fragile, just like the consummate learner. Like, I'm just learning moving forward.
Yep.
Well, that's incredibly helpful, right? Because I think as what we could do is look at our own individual businesses and look at our own individual makeup as entrepreneurs. Like, I'm saying this for everybody listening in right now. And you start saying, where do I fit on the spectrum? What does my business look like right now? How can I move it to a path that creates value based on some of these little golden nuggets that we've uncovered in this conversation, right? Chris, what question am I not asking you that you think is valuable and important for entrepreneurs to really learn about building and selling, building and scaling and selling a business? Like, What am I not asking you?
Hey, Rob, you've done a great job asking really good questions. The only other ones that I might think about is just, hey, how early should an entrepreneur start thinking about this? And
Mhm,
our advice is, if you're planning on transitioning, at least 3 or 4 years ahead of time, because that gives
mhm,
you enough runway to fix stuff that's broken or things that could be, dressed up a little bit. And the other piece I think is, it's back to that. Hey, what type of approach should an entrepreneur take to all this? And I would say, you want somebody who's pretty curious and who is interested in learning, because this process that we're talking about, again, most entrepreneurs go through once in their lifetime, and getting educated and getting up to speed on what all of that involves, we think is a huge deal for them, and will definitely help them in this journey, not feel so out of control or so stressed.
mhm. Chris, have you ever read the book? It's just like a little story, but I think it's a great book. Have you ever read the book Built to Sell? Does that ring a bell?
I think I have a long, long time ago.
Long time. It's an older book,
Yeah.
but it's just
Yeah.
like the story of this marketing firm, and the guy is tired of his business and he wants to sell it, but it's not, you know, it relies on him. He's got 17 different uh, business lines. Is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's such a wonderful story about his relationship with a wise mentor who guides him through this process. And I feel like that's what you've been doing, right? You kind of walk them through this process to get to a point where he has the option to sell. And at the end of the story, just a spoiler for everybody, he's like, "I love my business so much now; it just spits out cash. Like, why do
Perfect.
I don't need to sell it, right?"
Yeah, I always tell clients, we want you in a position where you're indifferent to whether you sell your business or not. And that what that means to us is, if the business does sell, it's going to be a hell of a deal, because it has to be something that's so much better than what you have today. And if you can get that business to be where it can be independent of you and still do really well, I mean, that's a perfect position to be in,
Hmm.
where it is an asset for you.
Hmm. How many times does that happen? Have you ever had that happen? People approach you and say, "You know what? I'm just going
Oh,
to keep it."
I think most business owners that are coming to us are pretty intent on transitioning.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, you'll see somebody that says, I mean, like the guy at the pet supplement business. I mean, he, for the longest time, just said, "Hey, I really love what I'm doing, and the business is fun." And I think when the dollars got so big, I think is when he concluded, "Hey, I probably ought to take advantage of this." And but I think, again, for a lot of these entrepreneurs, it's kind of the game that they like to play. And
Hmm.
so if you can get the business into the situation where it's just the game that you're playing that you love, I mean, how come what's better than that?
That's it. That's it. I always say, let's just play a game. When you really figure it all out, like, this is a game. Enjoy the game. Incremental improvement along in that process, and you just love the journey, right?
For sure.
Love the journey. Well,
For
Chris,
sure.
I appreciate you pouring into the grid community. I really do. If people want to find you, you gave it to us once before, but what's your Instagram handle? What's your business website? Like, whatever you want to give us so that they can find you.
Yeah. So the website is www.class6partners.com, or they can reach me at chris@class6partners.com. And happy to help in any way we can. We love, love, love entrepreneurs.
I love that. I love the fact that you love entrepreneurs. We love entrepreneurs. So.
Well, if you think about in this country, I live in Colorado, which is a small to medium sized business dominated community. And there's 60 to 70% of the hiring here. And without their willingness to take on all that risk and deal with all the headaches that they deal with as entrepreneurs, we don't have an economy. And so we're very, very grateful to what they do, and admire it.
Yeah, I always say, I feel like with other business owners, I feel like I understand them. They're like kindred spirits to me. We've been on this journey. It doesn't matter if it's a, $500,000 business or a $50 million business, right? You're all experiencing growth on that journey, right?
For
And
sure.
you're just at different stages, but it is like modern day, uh, modern day explorers. That's what I
Yep.
kind of think of an entrepreneur is,
For
right?
sure. For
Yeah,
sure. It's an adventure.
it's an adventure. Chris, thank you so much.
Rob, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.